Welcome to the Crypto Layer HQ. Today is the 4th of March and we are having a big green day. So far, we've managed to rally about 8% on the day. And we have previously discussed that going into March, there was a good chance we would have some strength, since in previous bear market years, for example, back in 2022, we can see that we did end up consolidating and we did rally in March, and we can see that the rally was about 25%. And even if we look back in 2018, we also had some strength around the February-March period. And even if we go back to 2014, we can see during March we bottomed and we did have this big green day, which eventually did end up failing and did not last very long. So we do have several examples of getting some strength into March, even if it's short-lived and does end up rejecting. So if we look at the level we are currently at, which is about 74K, we've previously identified that this was a very key level, since we can see that this was the level we initially rejected back in March of 2024 and then eventually retested in April of 2025. And now we are back at this level, which we can clearly see from the chart was a very critical level. So it is possible that we end up rejecting from this level and potentially putting in a local top and going lower. Of course, if we do continue higher, I would say the next major levels are potentially between 80K and 87K, since if we look, we can see that 80K was also quite a major level, where in November of 2025 we wicked to it and then bounced, and even in March and April of 2025 it did act as a support level. And of course, whole numbers are usually psychological levels, so 80K will definitely act as a psychological level that might end up getting rejected. So now that we are at 74K, it's going to be very interesting to see how Bitcoin acts at this level, and if we end up rejecting and potentially going lower. I will say that there is a decent chance that we end up rejecting from this level, so potentially if we do end up consolidating and struggling to go higher, maybe into April or May time, we could end up going into the 40s from around this level. If we do manage to break through it and we do have continued strength, then definitely 80K could be a region to watch. If we do manage to break 80K, then I will say the final zone will be between 80 and 87K, where I have a high amount of conviction that we will end up rejecting in that area. So that could end up looking like something like this, where we end up rejecting in this region above 80K. And I would say 87K is probably going to be a wall, since it did act as a major level in Q4 of 2025 and even January of 2026, where we did act as a support. So that support will turn into resistance, and I believe it will be very hard for Bitcoin to break above 87K if we do even manage to get there. But I would imagine that once we are in the 80K region, lots of people will see that as a nice place that they can finally exit out of positions they didn't want to get into, and potentially a lot of people will get euphoric and it will pull some buyers into who end up buying a local high that ends up getting rejected further into more weakness in potentially later April or even into May. So these are the levels I am currently watching, as we have had a good amount of strength so far. And oftentimes when there is momentum with Bitcoin, we do usually continue with that momentum. But in bear market years, do expect that it is possible to get strong rejections. I wouldn't be trying to trade this on the upside. If you do have a position that you are unwinding, potentially if we go higher, this could give you opportunities to do so. But for now, I remain bearish on the medium time frame, as in going into Q4 of 2026, where we will potentially eventually find a bottom, and maybe we will end up having something that looks like this and consolidating in the 40s and then potentially starting to go higher in 2027. So definitely keep an eye out on these levels, and it's going to be interesting to see how this rally plays out, especially as people seem to be switching very bullish. If you're looking at Twitter, you can see that people are calling for all-time highs again already, and that we're going to have a huge rally from this point, which of course is possible, but oftentimes when people get that bullish in bear market years, it does result in just causing lower highs to happen, since it's rare that what the majority of people are saying on Twitter, influencers, and so on happens. Usually we end up having a bottom when there is a lot more fear and panic, and everyone is saying Bitcoin is dead and that we're never going to recover. And there's a lot less kind of your euphoric types of tweets. So that's kind of when you can see a bottom to be formed, similar to what happened in 2022 when the FTX collapse happened. And when we were trading in the 20s, the timeline was always very negative on Twitter, and people were just very depressed, and there wasn't much optimism about price and Bitcoin going higher. Mostly people were thinking we were going to go to 8K or even 4K, and no one was really saying that we were going to just consolidate and then eventually have this massive rally that we had in 2024 and so on. So careful when it comes to buying strength in years where we expect to be in a bear market, since oftentimes it catches people offside, similarly to what happened in 2022. Definitely when we had this rally, a lot of people were calling to go to new all-time highs from that point, but of course the complete opposite happened. So just make sure you have a plan if we do end up rejecting at these levels and going lower later this year, that you know what you're going to be doing and how you plan on deploying some capital to Bitcoin if you do want to hold a position.